Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Radha Shivasudhi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasudhi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasudhi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपीकांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। बोलो श्री राधे कृष्ण भगवान की जय। बोलो श्रीमद् भागवतम की
जय।
जय। हरे कृष्णा जय।
हरे कृष्णा प्रधान जी, हरे कृष्णा तरुण।
हरे कृष्णा तरुण। तो हरे कृष्णा वीरेंद्र सर, कैसे हो?
हाँ बढ़िया।
हेलो तरुण, हरे कृष्णा। ऑलराइट। तो कल हम लोग श्लोक 8 पढ़ रहे थे ऑफ चैप्टर अध्याय 29 एंड इस चैप्टर में हम लोग पढ़ रहे हैं द कन्वर्सेशन बिटवीन नारद मुनि एंड किंग प्राचीन भविष्यत। So after Narad Muni told the story of King Puranjan, King Prachin Bhaishat, Narad Muni को बोल रहे हैं कि all the examples and the way the story was told is not easily understood by the common people. And so Narad Muni is now telling King Prachin Bhaishat what did he really mean by describing the King Puranjan and the whole city and all those things. And that's what we are reading right now. Yeah. So let's continue to read. Ajay.
अक्षिणी नासिके कर्णोमुखम शिश्न गुदाविति द्वे द्वे द्वारो बहिर्याति यस्ति यस्ति दिन्द्रिय संयुतः. The eyes, nostrils, and ears are pairs of gates situated in one place. The mouth, genitals, and rectums are also different gates. Being placed into a body having these 9 gates, the living entity acts externally in the material world and enjoys sense objects like form and taste. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so I think we read this book yesterday, right? So what Narad is saying is, so he's describing like the 9 gates of the city, which were talked about. The city is like the body, is the material body is the city, and it has 9 gates, right? Like the nostrils, eyes, and all that. And what it's saying is the sense objects, a human being gets entangled into this material world and then enjoys the sense objects like form and taste and so on and so forth, right? It says that not being aware of the spiritual position, right? Because you forget the spiritual position, the living entity directed by the mind, man, goes out through the 9 gates to enjoy material objects. Because of long association with material objects, he forgets his real spiritual activities and is thus misled. Yeah, that's what is being mentioned by Narad Muni to in Prachin Bharishat. So we'll continue reading Shlok 9. Virendra?
अक्षिणी नासिके आस्यमिति पंचपुरः कृताः दक्षिणः दक्षिणः कर्ण उत्तराचोत्तरः स्मृतः पश्चिमे इत्यधो द्वारो गुदं शिश्रमिहोच्यते. Translation: 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a mouth, altogether 5, are situated in the front. The right ear is accepted as the southern gate, and the left ear is the northern gate. The two holes or gates situated in the west are known as rectum and genital organ.
Hare Krishna. Yeah? It says like of all sides, the eastern is considered most important, primarily because the sun rises from the direction. The gates on the eastern side are the eyes, nose, and mouth are thus very important gates in the body. Yeah? Tarun is driving actually. So Tarun, I don't think you can read, right? So, right? Tadyotavirmukhi chatra netre ekatra nirmite rupam vibhrajitam tabhyam vichaste chakshusheshwarah. The two gates named Khadyot and Avirmukhi, which have been spoken of, are the two eyes side by side in one place. The town name Vibharjit should be understood as form. In this way, the two eyes are always engaged in seeing different kinds of forms. Yeah. So all the karmendriyas and indriyas are being described by Narad Muni related to the story which we read in the previous chapter, right? For King Prachibarhisat. Ajay?
Sure. Nalini Nalini Nase Grandha Saurav Uchyate Ghrano Avadhuto Mukhyasam Vipano Vagra Savidrasaha. The two doors named Nalini and Nalini should be known as the two nostrils, and the city named Saurabh represents aroma. The companion spoken of as Avadhut in the sense of a smell. The door called Mukhya is the mouth, and Vipana is the faculty of speech. Rasajna is the sense of taste.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So if you just remember, like all these words, right? All these were utilized in the King Puranjan's story, right? Virendra?
आपनो व्यवहारोऽत्र चित्रमन्दो बहुधनम् पितृर्हुर्दक्षिणः कर्ण उत्तरो देवहु स्मृतः. The city called Apana represents engagement of the tongue in the speech, and Bahudana is the variety of foodstuffs. The right ear is called the gate of Pitru, and the left ear is called the gate of Devahu.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Isha?
Hare Krishna.
Can you read?
Yeah. Pravritam cha nivratam cha shastram panchalasam nitam pitrayanam devayanam shrotrak chitradarad. Narad Muni continued, the city spoken of as Dakshin Panchal represents the scriptures meant for directing pravriti, the process of sense enjoyment and fruitive activities. The other city, named Uttar Panchal, represents the scriptures meant for decreasing fruitive activities and increasing knowledge. The living entity receives different kinds of knowledge by means of two ears, and some living entities are promoted to Pitralok and some to Devalok. All this is made possible by the two ears. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, right? So you say the ears are so important, right? Some living entities are promoted based on what you are hearing, right? Like Shavanam is. And also it says the Vedas are known as Shruti, and the knowledge received from them through oral reception is called Shrutadhara, right? So as stated in Bhagavad Gita, one can be promoted to the planets of the demigods or to the planets of Pitas, forefathers, or even to the Vaikuntha planets simply through the process of hearing. Yeah, hearing Kirtan, hearing Katha, like that. Will be mentioned. Veshisham narkam paryu lubdako andho tume shru haste pado pumastabhyam yukto yati karoti cha. When it is said that Puranjan goes to Vesasa, it is meant that he goes to hell. He is accompanied by Lubdhaka, which is the working sense in the rectum. Formerly, I have also spoken of two blind associates. These associates should be understood to be the hands and legs. Being helped by the hands and legs, the living entity performs all kinds of work and moves hither and thither, right? Like the Karmendriya is what is being described. Ajay?
Antahpuram cha hridayam vishu chirman uchyate. Tatra moham prasadam va harsh praptoti tadrunay. The word Antahpur refers to the heart. The word Visushina, meaning going everywhere, indicates the mind. Within the mind, the living entity enjoys the effect of the modes of material nature. These effects sometimes cause illusion, sometimes satisfaction, and sometimes jubilation. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And who is saying this?
Narad
Who is
Muni?
Narad Muni? Yeah. So Narad Muni is speaking right now to King Prachibarhisat. He is explaining how this city, which is the body, works, right? And
Right.
we read yesterday, like how many karmendriyas are there, how many gyanendriyas are there, right? What are the senses, what are the 9 gates on the body, and all those things. So the whole science of spiritual science of the body is being described, right? Are we done?
यथा यथा विक्रियते गुणातो विकरोति वा तथा तथोपद्रष्टात्मा तद्वृत्ति रनुकार्यते. Formerly, it was explained that the queen is one's intelligence. While one is awake or asleep, that intelligence creates different situations. Being influenced by contaminated intelligence, the living entity envisions something and simply imitates the actions and reactions of his intelligence.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so it describes how the intelligence works. Isha? Isha, you're there?
Yeah. Deho ratas tav indrashva shamvatsara raho gati dvikarma chakras triguna dvaja panchasu banduraha mano rashmir buddhi suto rin nido dvandva kavaraha panchendriyartha prakshepa paha sapta dhatu varutakaha akutir vikramo bahyo mega trishnam pradavati ekadashendriya chamaha pancha san vinodkrita. Narad Muni continued, what I refer to as the chariot was in actuality the body. The senses are the horses that pull that chariot. As time passes year after year, these horses run without obstruction, but in fact, they make no progress. Pious and impious activities are the 2 wheels of the chariot. The 3 modes of material nature are the chariot's flags. The 5 types of life air constitute the living entity's bondage, and the mind is considered to be the rope. Intelligence is the chariot driver. The heart is the sitting place in the chariot, and the dualities of life, such as pleasure and pain, are the nodding place. The 7 elements are the coverings of the chariot, and the working senses are the 5 external processes. The 11 senses are the soldiers. Being engrossed in sense enjoyment, the living entity, seated on the chariot, hankers after fulfillment of his false desires and runs after sense enjoyment life after life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so how beautifully, yeah, the body structure has been described, right? By comparing to the chariot. And the senses are the horses. Yeah. And as the time passes year after year, like as the time flies, as we know, right? And we keep running, these horses keep running without obstruction, right? But in fact, they make no progress. So if you are continuously engaged in the karma kand, what it's saying is essentially we make no progress. Yeah. There may be pious and impious activities are the two wheels of the chariot. So we are running constantly. Either we are doing pious activities or we are doing impious activities, and we are getting karmas and the results of those activities. And the three modes of material nature are the chariot's flag. So the three modes, which are, what are the three modes of material nature?
Rajagun, Tamogun, and Satogun.
Yeah. So Satogun, Rajogun, and Tamogun. Those are the materialistic gunas, which is what is influencing all our karmas and all our activities. Right. So those are shown as flags in the chariot. And then 5 types of air, which is the pran vayu, and there are sapan, apan, like that vayu, yeah, is the living entity's bondage. That's how the living entity is surviving. And the mind, of course, which is man is the mind, is considered to be the rope. And the intelligence is the driver. Yeah, so the buddhi is driving the whole chariot, the body. Heart is the sitting place, and the dualities of life, the pleasure and pain, are the noting place, right? That's where we feel. Then it says the 7 elements are the coverings of the chariot. So this body is covered by the 7 elements. Those 7 elements here are the, like the skin, the thin layer on the skin, the bone, the flesh, marrow, like that. Yeah. So those are the 7 bodily layers, which are saying is coverings of the chariot. And the working senses are the 5 external processes, right? As we looked at 5 karmendriya, 5 gyanendriya, right? And the 11 senses are the soldiers. The 11 senses are the 5 karmendriya, 5 gyanendriya, and 1 mind, which is man. And as we know, right, which are the 5 gyanendriyas? I think yesterday we were talking about that, right?
Yeah, eyes, nose, ear, skin,
right, and the tongue.
and the tongue.
Right, the 5 gyanendriya by which we sense all the pleasure or the pain, we sense through them, right? With the eyes, ears, tongue, nose, and the skin. Skin, we feel the touch. Yeah. And then what it's saying is, being engrossed in sense enjoyment, the living entity seated on the chariot, what do? Hankers after fulfillment of the false desires and runs after sense enjoyment, life after life. Life after life because of the so many births and deaths we have had, right? Constantly, the cycle of old age, birth, death, and disease. Yeah. Actually, nice purport. So maybe let's read this. Ajay?
Sure. The entanglement of the living entity in sense enjoyment is very nicely explained in these verses. The word sanivastra, meaning the progress of time, is significant. Day after day, week after week, fortnight after fortnight, month after month, year after year, the living entity becomes entangled in chariot's progress. The chariot rests on 2 wheels, which are pious and impious activities. The living entity attains a certain position in life in a particular type of body according to his pious and impious activities. But his transmigration into different bodies should not be taken as progress. Real progress is explained in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Tyakatva deham punarjanma neti. One makes real progress when he does not have to take another material body, as is stated in Chaitanya Karitamrita, Madhya 19.138. Ita Brahmananda Bhari Ananta Jiva Gyan Kaurastha Lasya Yoni Kariye Brahman.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So basically, a couple of things nicely mentioned in this paragraph, right? Are one is, of course, the living entity attains a certain position in life, right? And based on his pious and impious activities, the transmigration happens into different bodies. But what is being mentioned, right? Even if we have a lot of pious activities and the migration happens to a higher level of bodies, Yeah, it should not be taken as a progress, because the real progress is when one does not have to take another material body, is what is being mentioned. Yeah. And he also says the Chaitanya Charitamrita is saying like the Chorashi Laksh Yonite. Yeah, we know the 84 million, 8.4 million different types of birth, right? Is what is being mentioned here. Yeah. Let's continue reading, Virendra.
The living entity is wandering throughout the entire universe and taking birth in various species on different planets. Thus he moves up and down, but that is not real purpose. The real purpose is getting out of this material world altogether. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Canto 8.16, Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Punar Avartino Urja Juna Mam Upayatya Tu Kaunteya Punar Janmana Vidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death takes place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Even if one is promoted to Brahmaloka, the highest planet in the universe, he has to come down again to the lower planetary systems. Thus, he is wandering up and down perpetually under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Being illusioned, he thinks he is making progress. He is like an airplane circling in the earth day and night, incapable of leaving the earth's gravitational field. Actually, there is no progress because the airplane is conditioned by the earth's gravity.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest planet. How many planets are there in this universe?
14.
14, yeah?
14, yeah.
Yeah, there are 14 planets, right? We have 6 below us and 7 below us and 6 above us. So Bhulok, ours is Bhulok, and we have 6 planets above us and 7 below us, right? The lowest one is Patal, yeah? And the highest one is Brahmalok, yeah? So it's also called as Satyalok, where Lord Brahma resides. That's the highest place. So there are 14 planets in this world. What is being mentioned, irrespective of whichever planet you are in, everyone is scared of birth and death. Yeah. So even we know like Lord Brahma's age is like 350 trillion years. So it's a huge, long duration. But the fact is still there's a limitation. Yeah. So is what being mentioned. So here nice purport. Let's continue reading this issue.
Just as a king is seated on a chariot, the living entity is seated in the body. The sitting place is the heart, and the living entity sits there and engages in the struggle for existence, which goes on without progress perpetually. In the words of Narottama Das Thakur, Karma Kanda Jnana Kanda Keval Vishar Banda Amrita Baliya Yeba Khaya Nana Yuni Sada Fire Kadarya Bhakshana Kare Tara Janma Adaha Pateyaya. The living entity struggles very hard due to the influence of fruitive activity and mental speculation and simply gets a different type of body life after life. He eats all kinds of nonsense and is condemned by his activities of sense enjoyment. If one really wants to progress in life, he must give up the ways of karma kand and jnana kand, fruitive activities, and mental speculation. Being fixed in Krishna consciousness, one can become free from the entanglement of birth and death in the vain struggle for existence. In these verses, the words Mriga Trishnam Radhavati are very significant because the living entity is influenced by a thirst for sense enjoyment. He is like a deer that goes to the desert to search out water. In a desert, an animal simply searches in vain for water. Of course, there is no water in the desert, and the animal simply sacrifices his life in an attempt to find it. Everyone is planning for future happiness, thinking that if he can somehow or other reach a certain point, he will be happy. In actuality, however, when he comes to that point, he sees that there is no happiness. He then plans to go further and further to another point. This is called Mrigatishna, and its basis is sense enjoyment in this material world. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So nicely, clearly mentioned, right? What happens? The living entity, right, is getting different type of body life after life. And then we are in the Karmkand. But what is being mentioned, the most important part is, right, like being fixed in Krishna consciousness. And the way to fix is chanting, right? Shavanam, Kirtanam, Bhakti Yoga, as Lord Krishna himself has mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, right? One can become free from the entanglement of birth and death. Just by doing the Bhakti Yoga, surrendering to Lord Krishna and chanting and getting engaged into that, one can become free from the entanglement of birth and death and the vain struggle for existence. Like as we all know, we all keep struggling for the existence somehow or other, right? And even if somebody achieves what he wants to achieve, like you can become president of this country, but then you again still wants to go further and further to another point, like Mrit Krishna, right? And of course, that is the sense enjoyment, as we know, in this materialistic world. Okay? So nicely explained. तस्याहानिः गंधर्वा गंधर्व्यो रात्रयः स्मृताः हरन्त्यायुः परिक्रांत्या सतयुत्तरशतत्रयम्. What was previously explained as Chandveg, powerful time, is covered by days and nights, named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which numbers 360. Yeah. So if you remember, we read about there was a whole chapter about the Chandveg and the Kal Kanya, right? The Kal Kanya, the daughter of time, and the Chandveg. We read that whole story. And this is what is being explained, that Chandveg is powerful time, right? And then Chandveg has the sons and daughters, 180 sons called Gandharvas, 180 daughters called Gandharvis, which is compared to day and night, right? So like that 360 days and night, the lifespan is gradually reduced by the space of days and nights, is what is being mentioned. Yeah. So we'll continue to read. Hare Krishna, Rasiksha Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna, पढ़ेंगे?
काल कन्या जरा साक्षात लोकस्ताम नाभिनंदिति संसारम जगते मृत्यु छायाय यवनेश्वरः. What was described as a Kal Kanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshwara, Yavanraj, who is a death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So actually, if you remember, we read the story of Kal Kanya. Yeah. Actually, also I think it's the Kal Kanya, right? Narad Muni and asks Narad Muni to get married, and Narad Muni refuses, and she gives curse to Narad Muni that Narad Muni will not be able to stay at any one place. Yeah. Which actually becomes blessings to Narad Muni, because Narad Muni is constantly giving the spiritual message to everyone at different places, right? Like currently what we are reading is also given by Narad Muni to Prachibarhisat. So we read that story of Kal Kanya, which is understood as an old age, right? Because the old age is the Jara, and the Jara accepts Kal Kanya as a sister. If you remember, right, the Yamanraj, the Yamraj, yeah, asks Jara to accept Kal Kanya as a sister. And if you just go back and remember that whole story, right, that's what was mentioned. So just read this, Ajay.
Encaged within the body, the living being accepts Kalakanya old age just before death. Yavaneshwar is the emblem of death, Yamraj. Before going to the place of Yamraj, the living entity accepts Jara, old age, the sister of Yamraj. One is subjected to the influence of Yavanraj and his sister due to impious activity. Those who are in Krishna consciousness and are engaged in devotional service under the instruction of Narad Muni are not subjected to the influence of Yamaraj and his sister Jara. If one is Krishna conscious, he conquers death. After leaving the material body, he does not accept another body that is material but returns home, back to Godhead. This is verified by Bhagavad Gita 4.19. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So being Krishna conscious is so important, right? Next one. Virendra?
आधयो व्याधयस्तस्य सैनिका यवनाश्वरः भूतोपसर्गाश्रयः प्रज्वारो द्विविधो ज्वरः एवं बहुविधैर्दुःखैर्दैव भूतात्मसम्भवैः क्लिश्यमानः शतं वर्षं देहे देहि तमोवृतः प्राणेन्द्रियमनोधर्मा आत्मान्यथस्य निर्गुणः शेते कामलवान्ध्याय ममाहमिति कर्म कृत. Translation: The followers of Yavaneshwara, Yamraja, are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The entire living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of tribulations, the living entity is subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity out of ignorance accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So yeah, basically some of the things, right? Like so in the Vedas, it is stated that Shango hai ayam purusha hai. The living entity is actually separate from material existence. Right? The soul is different from the material existence. Right? Because the soul is everlasting, is what is being mentioned, right? For the soul is not material. Yeah. In Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that the living entity is the superior energy, and the material elements like earth, water, fire, air, and so on are the inferior energy. The material elements are also described as bhinna or separate energy. When the internal or superior energy comes in contact with the external energy, it is subject to so many tribulations, right? Like when our soul gets conditioned, it comes into existence with the material energy. That's when all the tribulations start. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord also says, Matra sparsha tu konteya sitoshna suksha sukha dukha. There. Because of the material body, the living entity is subjected to many tribulations brought about by air, water, fire, extreme heat, extreme cold, sunshine, excessive eating, unhealthy food, and maladjustments of the three elements of the body, kalp, pit, and kaph, pit, and vayu, and so on. Yeah. So that's how that thing is described. And I think this paragraph is very nice. So read this. Shiksha Prabhuji.
Knowing the basic misery of material existence, one should be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home back to God. Actually, the living entity is not at all happy in the material body because of the body. He suffers thirst and hunger and influenced by the mind, by words, by anger, by the belly, by the genitals, by rectum, and so on. Manifold miseries encircle the transcendental living entity simply because he desires to satisfy his senses in this material world. If he simply withdraws from the activities of the sense gratification and supplies his senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. With the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be free from all tribulations, and after giving up the body, he will go back home, back to God. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so nicely described how the material entanglement. I think we are going to pause here, and tomorrow we'll start with Shlok 26. And actually, we are also going to see like all these loks which are defined, right? We are talking about the 14 planets, upper and below. So tomorrow we are also going to read about each planet just to see, what kind of life and like what each planet is for, right? Like where Rishi Muni resides, or where Devdas resides, or Brahmalok, like that. Yeah. So we'll pause here right now since almost about time. And as Navratri is going on, today we are going to hear very beautiful Mahishasur Mardini Strotam. Yeah, again directly from the Vaishnav Devi temple. Yeah. So, and I'm also going to put where we can read also. Yeah. Okay. So very nice. It's actually around 9 minutes. So just a little bit over time, but very beautiful. So we can read it. I'm going to put it on the screen as well.
सर्वं तत्प्रसादेन तेन जाप्यमिदं शुभं शणेस्तु जप्यमानेऽस्मिन् स्तोत्रे सम्पत्तिरुच्यते भवत्येव समग्राभिः ततः प्रारभ्यमेव तत् ऐश्वर्यं यत्प्रसादेन सौभाग्यारोग्यसम्पदः शत्रुहानिः परो मोक्षः स्तूयते साकिञ्चरणैः श्री महिषासुरमर्दिनी स्तोत्रम् ऐगिरिनान्दिनि नन्दितमेदिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दनुते गिरिवरविन्ध्यशिरोधिनि वासिनि विश्वविलासिनि ज्येष्ठोनुते भगवति हे शितिकण्ठगडम्बिनि भूरिकडम्बिनि भूरिकृते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते पूर्वार्षिणि दुर्धरधर्षिणि दुर्मुखमर्षिणि हर्षरते त्रिभुवन पोषिणि शङ्कर तोषिणि किल्बिषमोषिणि घोषरते दण्डनि रोषिणि दिग्सुन्दरोषिणि दुर्मदशोषिणि सिन्धुसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते ऐ जगदम्ब बलवन् प्रियवासिनि हासते श्रीहरि शिरोमणि तुङ्ग हिमालय शृङ्गनिदालय मध्यगते मधु मधुरे मधुकैटभगन्त्यनि कैटभभञ्जनि रासरते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते ऐषदखण्ड विखण्डित रुण्ड वितुण्डित षण्ड गजाधिपते रिपुगजगण्ड विदारण चण्ड पराक्रम शुण्ड विगाधिपते द्विजभुजदण्ड निपातित खण्ड विपातित मुण्ड भटाधिपते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते ऐरन दुर्मद शत्रु बधोदित दुर्धरणि महाशिवदूतगिराप्रभुमाधिपते दुरितदुरेह दुराशय दुर्मतिदानवदूतकृतान्तमते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते ऐ शरणागत वीर वधूवर वीर पराभयदायिकरे त्रिभुवनमस्तक शूल विरोधि शिरोधि कृता मन शूल करे तुमिताम्बर तुण्डोऽभिनाथम सुदेव वर्णितौ प्रतिमात्र निराकृतोषते समर विशोषित शोणित बीज समुद्भव शोणित बीजलते शिव शिव शंभर शंभ महाहवतल्पित भूत विशाचरते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव रणु संकर रक्षण संगवरे स्फुरलङ्घन टङ्कटके कनक विशङ्क विसर्जन शङ्कर सहर शङ्कहतावनुके ऋतु चतुरङ्ग बलक्षितिरङ्गरुडात्महुरङ्गरटाकटुके जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव सुरललना तथेयतथेयतथाभिनयोत्तरणेश्वरते कुकुथा कुकुथो देडदाडिकदाडिकदाडगानरते धुतकुटथो धुटधेन्द्रे मितध्वनिघोरमृदङ्गनिनादरते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव जय 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 शस्त्रपरासुरगा परमेश्वरुते धन धन देव धैर्यतनो पुरसेन्द्रित मोहित भूतपदे नटित नटे नटनायक नाटिदनाय सुगाणरते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव हय सोमनः 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 सोमनो हरकान्तियुते श्वेत रजनी 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 करभक्तविदे पुनयनमे भ्रमर 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 भ्रमराधिपदे जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव सहित महाहवमल्लमतल्लिकमल्लिकरल्लिकमल्लरते भिल्लिकमल्लिकमल्लिकभिल्लिकभिल्लिकभल्लिकभल्लते भिल्लिकपल्लसमुल्लसितारुणतल्लजपल्लवसल्ललिते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव अविरल गण्डगणन्मदमेदुरमत्तमतङ्गजुराजपदे त्रिभुवन भूषण भूतकलानिधि रूपपयोनिधिराजसुदेव ऐस्तुतले जनलाल समान समूहन मन्मथराजसुदेव जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव कमलदलामल कोमलकान्तिकलाकलितामलभाललते सकल विलास कलानिधया प्रणखेलि कलञ्जर हंसकुले आदिकुल संकुल कुवलय मण्डल मौळे विनन्थकुलादिकुले जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव करमुरली रघुवीजित कूजित लज्जित कोकिलमञ्जुमते निरतकुलित मनोहर गुञ्जित रञ्जित शैलनिकुञ्जगते निजगुणभूत महाशबरे गण सद्गुण संवृत खेलितले जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव कडितडपे तदुकूलगजे कर्मयोगनिरस्थित चन्द्रके धनतसुरासुरमौळे मणिस्फुरधंसुरसण्डक चन्द्रदेव जितकनकाचलमौळे पदोजित निर्भर कुञ्जर कुम्भकुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव विजित सुहस्रगुरेक सुहस्रगुरेक सुहस्रगुरेकनुते जित सुरतारक संगर तारक संगर तारक सूर्णसुदेव सुरत समाधि समान समाधि समान समाधि सुजातरते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुदेव पदकमलं करुणानिधये हरिमस्तति गोनुदिनं Ai Kamale Kamala Nilaye Kamala Nilaya Sakatam Bhagavad अथ दिव्यापराध क्षमापण स्तोत्रम् नमः
Hare Krishna.
Hare
So very beautiful Mahishasur Mardini Stuti, right? And then I think Navratri is there till Thursday. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we are going to hear the Kshama Stuti, which is just about to start. So we'll hear the Kshama Stuti tomorrow. Yeah. And then, of course, we'll continue reading our Srimad Bhagavatam, 9:30 p.m. EST, 7 a.m. India time. Okay. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.